Lecture 17, The 4 Words That Are Key to Being a Teacher, Part 2. 2 Operating Principles of Employing People's Strengths. I just talked about 2 misconceptions in thinking that hinder utilizing people's strengths. One is the belief that a person should develop comprehensively, and the other is the belief that a person can make greater progress in their weak areas. Now, I will move from the concept to the operation level and explain 2 important principles for utilizing people's strengths. I will use a story and a metaphor to explain these 2 principles. The story is about President Lincoln. Lincoln is recognized as one of the greatest presidents in American history, and his great achievement was winning the Civil War and maintaining the unity of the United States. The reason why he was able to win the Civil War was largely due to his appointment of General Grant as the overall commander. However, General Grant had a problem: he loved to drink. Someone complained to President Lincoln that General Grant was an alcoholic and could not handle the job. It is said that President Lincoln responded by saying, "If I knew what brand of whiskey he liked, I would send a few barrels to the other generals too." This story reflects an important principle for utilizing people's strengths, which is to tolerate people's weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses, and if their weaknesses do not hinder them from utilizing their strengths, we should tolerate them. Management guru Drucker even said that sometimes, the value of a leader is to tolerate the weaknesses of subordinates like this and help others tolerate their weaknesses. I just used a story about President Lincoln to explain an important principle for utilizing people's strengths, tolerating people's weaknesses. Now, I will use a metaphor to explain another important principle for utilizing people's strengths. This metaphor comes from the famous consultant Marcus Buckingham. Buckingham said that after researching a large number of managers, he came to the conclusion that mediocre managers play checkers, while great managers play chess. Think about it: what is the difference between checkers and chess? You may have noticed that the main difference is that in checkers, each piece is the same and moves the same way, while in chess, each piece is unique and has its own way of moving. Whitehead's point is that great managers are adept at discovering and utilizing the differences among their subordinates. The chess metaphor embodies another important principle of personnel management, which is to recognize individual differences. There are 2 principles of operation: one is to tolerate shortcomings, and the other is to recognize differences. Recognizing differences means discovering the unique strengths of each person and using them skillfully. Now, I have a question for you: what is the best way to motivate people? In the previous lecture, I mentioned that Drucker believed that achievement is the best way to motivate people. However, Whitehead's answer is that the best way to motivate people depends on who you are trying to motivate and should be tailored to the individual. Which answer do you think is better? 3. Selection, cultivation, utilization, retention. Regarding the principle of using people's strengths, I have discussed 2 misconceptions and 2 important operational principles. One is to tolerate shortcomings, and the other is to recognize individual differences. I have talked about the ideas and operations, and now I will discuss their specific applications. I believe that the key to being a leader as a teacher is to use people's strengths. Since it is a key factor, a lot of work should revolve around it. In fact, we often summarize the work related to personnel in enterprises into 4 words: selection, cultivation, utilization, and retention. These 4 aspects should all revolve around using people's strengths. How can we apply this key factor of using people's strengths in selection, cultivation, utilization, and retention? Let me explain them one by one. First, let's talk about selection, which is recruitment. How can we use people's strengths in recruitment? It means that when recruiting, we should mainly focus on strengths, not on weaknesses. When recruiting, we should mainly focus on what the person can do, rather than what they cannot do. The chess metaphor I mentioned earlier actually explains why a person's weaknesses are not that important in an organization. An organization is more like chess than a barrel. Some chess pieces are weak, but they also have their own strengths and can work together with other pieces. An organization is a team, and where you are not good at, there are other people in the organization who are better at it. Drucker once said, "The only purpose of an organization is to enable people to make their strengths effective." He also said, "The reason why organizations exist is to make your weaknesses irrelevant." I have talked about selection, now let's talk about cultivation, which means training. When you train a person, you should also use their strengths, that is, train them based on their strengths. I gave an example of a sales manager earlier, who is good at sales but not good at finance. If you want to train him, should you let him participate in sales training or finance training? Many companies will let him participate in finance training, which may be a mistake. As I mentioned earlier, he may have difficulty improving in finance, and the best approach may be to have someone assist him in finance. Even if he can improve in finance, according to the principle of comparative advantage in economics, his improvement in sales will make a greater contribution to the organization. I have talked about selection and cultivation, now let's talk about utilization. When selecting and cultivating people, we should use their strengths, and when it comes to utilization, it goes without saying that we should use their strengths. How? You should use them in the work they are best at, not in a higher position. Companies are prone to making this mistake: a person does a job well, and then they are promoted to a higher position, but it may be a job that they are not good at. We ourselves sometimes face this test: if we are promoted to a job that we are not good at, will we accept it? Finally, let's talk about retention. How can we retain people? It is also by using their strengths. You can use salary, emotions, and culture to retain people, but there is another method that may be more effective, which is to let them do the work they are good at. Because they are doing the work they are good at, they are happy and motivated every day, and they are more willing to stay.